"Who the hell are you?" The words came out calm, measured, like I was asking about the weather. The young punk standing in my kitchen at 2:30 a.m. didn't expect that tone from a 51-year-old man in pajama pants. "My name's David Rourke, 20 years Navy SEAL, retired 3 years now." I'd gotten up for a glass of water when I spotted him rifling through my drawers. Most men my age would have panicked, called 911, maybe grabbed a baseball bat. Not me. 20 years of high-stakes operations taught me something valuable. Stay calm, assess the threat, control the situation. The intruder spun around, crowbar in his hand, skinny kid, maybe 25, nervous energy. His eyes darted between me and the back door like a trapped animal. "Shut up and give me your money and watch, old man." He waved the crowbar with shaking hands. I studied him for a moment. Drug user, probably desperate. The way he held that crowbar told me he'd never actually hurt anyone with it. Amateur hour. "I'll give you 2 options, I said, crossing my arms. 1, you get out of here right now, and I'll pretend this never happened. 2, you try to finish what you came here for, and you'll suffer the consequences." He laughed, actually laughed. "You think you can stop me, old man? I've got a weapon." What he didn't know was that I'd already counted 3 ways to disarm him, 2 exit routes, and identified every potential weapon within reach. The salt shaker on the counter, the cast iron skillet hanging on the wall. "My hands. Your call," I said. That's when I noticed the small red light blinking on my security camera in the corner. The system my daughter Emily had installed last Christmas. The one I'd complained about as unnecessary. The one that uploaded everything to some cloud storage I didn't fully understand. The kid chose wrong. 3 years ago, I'd retired from the teams with full honors. 2 decades of missions I couldn't talk about in places I couldn't name. My wife Laura had passed from cancer 5 years earlier, and after the funeral, the house in Boise felt too big, too quiet. Emily lived in Portland now, worried about her old man living alone. She had installed the security system during her last visit, along with one of those smart doorbells and motion sensors I never asked for. "Dad, you need to stay connected to the world," she'd said, programming the cameras. "Besides, what if something happens?" I'd humored her. After Laura died, Emily became my anchor to civilian life. She called every Sunday, sent care packages I didn't need, and treated me like I was fragile. I wasn't fragile, I was careful. The neighborhood had changed since we'd moved here 15 years ago. Young families replaced the retirees. New construction sprouted where old houses once stood. Crime had crept in too, break-ins mostly. Kids looking for quick cash for drugs. Mrs. Whitaker next door had been hit twice last month. They'd taken her television, some jewelry her husband left her. She'd asked if I'd keep an eye on things, knowing about my background from Laura's loose tongue at block parties years ago. "I sleep light," I told her. "Don't worry." The punk in my kitchen represented everything wrong with this new generation. No respect, no discipline. He probably figured an old man living alone was easy prey. He was about to learn otherwise. My military training never really left. Even in retirement, I maintained my fitness, kept my reflexes sharp. Muscle memory from 2 decades of combat operations doesn't just disappear because you hang up the uniform. I'd been in situations where split-second decisions meant the difference between coming home and being shipped home in a box. This scared kid with his crowbar didn't register as a real threat. He was a problem to be solved quickly and efficiently. What I didn't realize was how solving this problem would change everything. How one moment of applied training would ripple outward in ways I never expected. How my quiet retirement would become anything but quiet. The red light on that camera kept blinking, recording everything. Later, I'd understand that small detail would matter more than the crowbar, more than the kid's poor choices, more than anything else that happened in my kitchen that night. The kid made his move. He swung the crowbar in a wide arc, aiming for my head. Clumsy, telegraphed. I'd seen it coming from the moment he shifted his weight. I stepped inside his swing, caught his wrist, and applied just enough pressure to make him drop the weapon. It clattered to the floor like a punctuation mark, ending his criminal career. In one fluid motion, I had him face down on my kitchen tiles, his arm locked behind his back in a position that would hurt if he struggled. "Stay still," I said quietly. "You're done." He wheezed against the linoleum, trying to catch his breath. The whole encounter had lasted maybe 10 seconds. 20 years of training condensed into a moment of perfectly applied force. Not enough to seriously injure him, just enough to end the threat completely. "You broke my arm," he gasped. "No, I didn't, but I will if you keep moving." I reached for my phone with my free hand and dialed 911, keeping pressure on his shoulder blade to maintain control. 911, what's your emergency? This is David Rourke, 412 Maple Street. I've got a home intruder subdued. Need police response. Are you injured, sir? Negative. Suspect is secured. The kid tried to twist free. I increased pressure slightly and he went still again. Sir, officers are en route. Stay on the line. While we waited, I studied the young man beneath me. Jake, according to the wallet that had fallen from his pocket. Jake Lawson, 24 years old. Pictures of a girlfriend, maybe a sister. A life that was about to get much more complicated. You had a choice, I told him. Clean slate. Walk away. You picked this. I needed the money, man.
I'm sick. Everyone's got problems. Most people don't break into other people's homes to solve them. When the sirens grew loud enough to wake the neighborhood, I saw lights clicking on and windows across the street. Mrs. Whitaker's porch light, the young couple 3 houses down. By tomorrow, everyone would know about the break-in. The officers who responded were professional, efficient. They took Jake into custody, collected his crowbar as evidence, and asked for my statement. Routine stuff, except for Officer Collins's comment as they finished up. "Hell of a job, Mr. Rourke. Clean takedown. Just glad nobody got hurt. We'll need your security footage for evidence. Can you email it to the department?" I nodded, though I wasn't entirely sure how to access the files. Technology wasn't my strong suit. After they left with Jake, I stood in my quiet kitchen, adrenaline finally fading. The red light on the camera had stopped blinking. Whatever had been recorded was now stored somewhere in the digital cloud, waiting to be retrieved for a court case that would probably end in plea bargaining. I had no idea that footage would soon be seen by millions of people around the world. The next morning brought Detective Monroe to my door with a tablet and questions. "Mr. Rourke, we need to review the security footage. There's been a complication." She seemed uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact as she explained. Apparently, Officer Collins had uploaded the video file to the police department's social media account instead of the evidence database. A simple mistake. Wrong folder, but the damage was done. "How many people saw it?" I asked, pouring coffee. "About 50,000 so far. It's spreading fast." I watched the footage on her tablet. The camera angle caught everything perfectly. Jake breaking in through the back door, me walking into the kitchen in my pajama pants, completely calm. The brief conversation, his failed attack, the textbook disarmament and restraint. "This is evidence in a criminal case," I said. "Shouldn't it be private?" "Absolutely. We're trying to get it taken down. But once something hits the internet," she didn't need to finish. I understood. The video was already beyond anyone's control, spreading across platforms faster than it could be contained. My phone started ringing that afternoon. Local news stations wanting interviews. My neighbor Mrs. Whitaker calling to check on me. Emily from Portland, worried she'd seen something online about her father. "Dad, are you okay? Someone posted a link on Facebook. Is that really you?" "I'm fine, honey. Just a break-in. Handled it. "Dad, you looked like some kind of action hero. That poor kid didn't know what hit him." By evening, the video had been shared over 100,000 times. Comments ranged from admiration to criticism. Some called me a hero. Others questioned whether I'd used excessive force. Most just seemed entertained by watching a career criminal get thoroughly outmatched by a man in pajamas. Jake's public defender called that night, fishing for information about my background, looking for angles. I kept it simple. Home invasion, self-defense, minimal force applied, standard stuff. What wasn't standard was the growing online attention. Someone had identified Jake from other security footage around the neighborhood. His mugshot appeared alongside the video, turning him into a meme. "Worst burglar ever" became the most common caption. I tried to ignore it, go about my normal routine. Grocery shopping, morning runs, coffee with the guys at the Veteran Center. But everywhere I went, people recognized me. Store clerks, joggers in the park, even the mailman wanted to shake my hand. That was some smooth operating, Mr. Rourke. Guy never knew what hit him. The attention felt wrong somehow. I'd spent 20 years in jobs where success meant nobody knew your name, where the best operations were the ones nobody ever heard about. Now my face was attached to a viral video. My private moment turned into public entertainment. Jake's attorney pushed for assault charges, claiming I'd used excessive force. The prosecutor reviewed the video and dismissed it immediately. Clear case of self-defense against an armed intruder. But the legal victory felt hollow when the real battle was happening online, where I had no control over the narrative. The kid had made a stupid choice that night. He'd picked the wrong house, threatened the wrong man, and paid for it with swift professional consequences. But now his stupidity was being broadcast to the world, and somehow I'd become the star of a show I never auditioned for. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jake had broken into my home looking for something to steal. Instead, he'd stolen my anonymity, my quiet retirement, my peaceful existence. The video that would convict him had also convicted me to a life of unwanted fame. 2 weeks later, the numbers were staggering. 15 million views across all platforms. The video had been remixed, memed, and analyzed by everyone from self-defense instructors to late-night talk show hosts. Detective Monroe returned with more news, none of it good for Jake. We connected him to 3 other break-ins in the neighborhood. Same MO, same time of night. He's been working this area for months. Mrs. Whitaker had identified him as the man who'd robbed her twice. The young couple down the street recognized him from their doorbell camera. Jake hadn't just made one bad choice that night. He'd been making bad choices for months, and finally hit a house where the homeowner was prepared. But the deeper truth emerged when Emily visited from Portland, bringing printouts of online articles and social media posts. "Dad, do you realize what's happening here? You're not just some guy who stopped a burglar. You're a symbol." She spread newspaper clippings across my kitchen table. Navy SEAL veteran gives burglar fair warning, then schools him in consequences. Retired warrior demonstrates perfect self-defense. The most polite takedown in internet history. The video had been dissected frame by frame by military veterans, law enforcement professionals, and self-defense experts. They praised the restraint, the precision, the way I'd given Jake every opportunity to leave before using force. What bothers me, I told Emily, is that everyone's celebrating. This kid made some terrible choices, and now his worst moment is entertainment for millions. Maybe that's the point, Dad. Maybe other people thinking about breaking into homes will see what happened to Jake and reconsider. She had a point, but it didn't sit entirely right. I joined the military to serve my country, not to become a cautionary tale or internet sensation. The real revelation came when Detective Monroe called with an update on Jake's background. He wasn't just some desperate kid looking for drug money. He was a repeat offender who'd been targeting elderly residents specifically, thinking they'd be easy victims. He had a list, she explained. Houses of older residents, people living alone. Your address was on it along with 12 others in the neighborhood. This wasn't random, Mr. Rourke. This was predatory. That changed my perspective entirely. Jake hadn't stumbled into my house by accident or desperation. He'd selected me as a victim based on my age and living situation. He'd calculated that I'd be vulnerable, defenseless, easy prey. The video suddenly represented more than just one man defending his home. It had become a demonstration that assumptions about age and capability could be dangerously wrong. Jake had learned that lesson the hard way, and now millions of people were learning it alongside him. The military had taught me that intelligence gathering was crucial for mission success. Jake had failed at basic intelligence. He'd seen a 51-year-old man living alone, and made assumptions. He hadn't researched his target, hadn't considered alternative scenarios, hadn't prepared for resistance. His failure wasn't just tactical, it was strategic. And now that failure was being broadcast as a masterclass in what not to do when selecting victims. I began to understand why the video resonated with so many people. It wasn't just entertainment. It was justice served with mathematical precision, consequences delivered with textbook efficiency. People were hungry for that kind of clarity. In an increasingly complex world, Jake had gambled everything on a simple calculation. Old man plus isolated house equals easy money. The video documented exactly how wrong that calculation could be. The trial date arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. The courthouse was packed, not just with typical court observers, but with people who'd come specifically because of the video. Local news crews had set up outside, treating Jake's sentencing like a major story. I wore my best suit, the same one I'd worn to Laura's funeral. Dark blue, conservative, appropriate for serious occasions. Emily had driven up from Portland to be there, sitting in the front row behind the prosecution table. Jake looked smaller in person than he had on my kitchen floor. Orange jumpsuit, handcuffs, the kind of defeated posture that comes from months in county lockup with your worst moment playing on every television and phone screen in the facility. The prosecutor played the video for the courtroom. Even though I'd seen it dozens of times by now, watching it on the big screen felt different, more official. The audio was clearer than I remembered, my calm voice contrasting sharply with Jake's aggressive demands. The defendant broke into Mr. Rourke's home armed with a crowbar, the prosecutor explained to the judge. When offered the opportunity to leave peacefully, he chose violence. The video clearly shows Mr. Rourke using the minimum force necessary to protect himself and his property. Jake's public defender did his best with an impossible case. He argued that Jake was desperate, struggling with addiction, facing homelessness. All probably true, but none of it justified breaking into occupied homes with weapons. When called to testify, I kept my statement simple and factual. I gave him two clear options, I told the court. Leave peacefully, or face the consequences of continuing his criminal act. He chose to attack me with a crowbar. I used the minimum force necessary to stop the threat. In your military experience, the prosecutor asked, was the force you applied excessive? Absolutely not. I could have seriously injured him if that had been my intention. Instead, I controlled him until law enforcement arrived. Standard procedure. Jake's attorney tried to paint me as some kind of vigilante, but the video made his argument impossible. Everything was documented. The warning I'd given, Jake's choice to attack, the measured response that ended the threat without serious injury. But the most powerful moment came when Jake himself took the stand. His lawyer had probably advised against it, but Jake seemed determined to speak. I was desperate, he said, looking at his hands. I needed money for my habit. I thought he'd just hand over his wallet and watch, old guy alone in the house. I never expected, his attorney prompted, never expected what? I never expected him to be so professional about it, like it was just another day at the office for him. The courtroom was completely silent. Even Jake seemed to understand the absurdity of his situation. He'd broken into the home of a man uniquely qualified to handle exactly that situation, then documented his failure for the entertainment of millions. Judge Everett was thorough in his sentencing remarks. Mr. Lawson, you made a series of poor choices that night. You targeted an elderly resident thinking he'd be vulnerable. You brought a weapon into his home. When given the opportunity to leave without consequences, you chose violence. The video evidence shows clearly that Mr. Rourke responded appropriately to your threat. Jake received 3 years in state prison, plus restitution for the other break-ins they'd connected to him. But I knew the real sentence was already being served every day on every screen where people watched his moment of supreme failure. As court adjourned, Jake looked directly at me for the first time. No anger, no defiance, just the hollow recognition of a man who'd gambled everything and lost spectacularly. The video's final surge happened 3 months after Jake's sentencing. A national morning show picked up the story, interviewing me via satellite from the local news station in Boise.
Rourke, your video has now been viewed over 50 million times worldwide. What's your message to people who might be considering breaking into homes? I looked directly into the camera, thinking about Mrs. Whitaker, about every elderly person who lived in fear of becoming a victim. Choose differently, I said. Everyone faces hard times, difficult situations, but breaking into someone's home, threatening them in their own space, that crosses a line, and you never know who's on the other side of that line. The host smiled. Any regrets about giving Jake that warning? None. Everyone deserves a chance to make the right choice. He had that chance. That interview was replayed endlessly, but it was the courthouse footage that really sealed Jake's fate as internet infamy. Someone had recorded him watching the video on a tablet during a pre-trial meeting with his lawyer. His face, as he saw himself failing so completely, so publicly, became its own meme. The comments under that footage were brutal. When you realize you messed with the wrong house, that moment when your life choices catch up with you. Imagine being this bad at crime. Jake's name became shorthand for spectacular failure. Dating profiles mentioned not wanting a Jake situation. Parents used his story as a cautionary tale. Security companies used clips from my video in their advertising. The morning show appearance triggered another wave of attention. Magazine articles about home security, self-defense instructors using the footage in classes, veteran organizations inviting me to speak about preparedness and situational awareness. But the most satisfying moment came when Detective Monroe called with an update 6 months later. Burglaries in your neighborhood are down 60% since your video went viral, she reported. Word's gotten around that residents might not be as helpless as criminals assume. Jake had wanted to steal from one house and ended up making every house in the area safer. His failure had become everyone else's protection. Jake Lawson's life after prison became a study in the permanent consequences of viral infamy. Employment applications were rejected the moment background checks revealed his identity. Landlords refused to rent to someone whose face was synonymous with criminal incompetence. Dating became impossible when potential partners could easily find video of his most humiliating moment with a simple internet search. His family relationships crumbled under the weight of public embarrassment. His parents faced questions from neighbors and coworkers about their son's viral failure. His sister changed her last name and moved to another state to escape association with his notorious reputation. Even distant relatives found themselves explaining their connection to the infamous worst burglar ever whenever his video resurfaced online. Jake attempted to rebuild his life multiple times, but the permanent nature of internet fame made redemption nearly impossible. Every job interview, every apartment application, every attempt at forming relationships was sabotaged by employers, landlords, and romantic interests who recognized him from the viral footage. He eventually gave up trying to stay in Idaho and moved repeatedly across different states, but his digital footprint followed him everywhere. His story became required viewing in criminal justice courses as an example of how poor target selection and inadequate planning could result in consequences far beyond legal punishment. The video served as a deterrent to other potential criminals who recognized that underestimating victims could lead to permanent public humiliation lasting far longer than any prison sentence. Meanwhile, I accepted a community service award from Mayor Reynolds at a ceremony attended by grateful neighbors who felt safer knowing someone with my training and character lived among them. Mrs. Whitaker had started a neighborhood watch program inspired by the knowledge that preparation and awareness could turn potential victims into formidable opponents. Sometimes the most effective justice comes not from seeking revenge, but from letting foolish people face the natural consequences of their own poor decisions.